liberation truly offered, it was difficult for him to make such a choice. So life said, okay, I'm going to give you 24 hours of being awake so that you can taste what it's like and then compare to fame as an authority thereon and make your decision. Fair enough, thought the man, and life put him in the state, or the state in him for those viewers on the West Coast. And at the end of the designated period, life brought him back to his normal state of mind and asked, okay, which will it be? And again, the man began ruminating instead of answering. And life pushed, well, which will it be? And finally the man spoke, but with another question. Say, let me get this straight. If I choose the enlightenment over literary fame therein, will I stay forever as enlightened as I was during that 24 hours? Or will I be able to sometimes kind of slip out of it just enough that I could indulge just a little bit in presenting myself as an authority on the subject? And life forthwith reached down, grabbed the mystic, and hit the man smartly upside the head, causing his One man lost all respect for his mind once he realized how subject it was to such minor things as anchovies and oversleeping. Any good tyrant would rather be feared than respected. But when it comes to your mind, either one will work. Either one will keep you dancing with it long enough for the undertaker to arrive. Either him or someone from the stupid examiner's office to officially close your file. The vat. The problem, as an alert man sees it, is in first falling into the vat and then in becoming part of the vat. Never mind all the lesser ones. The supreme approaches are the struggle to be conscious of yourself and to not be, to remember yourself and to forget yourself, and to be mindful and mindless. All else is just warm-up time, preludes to nothing. Listen, they're playing my song. How can you be sure? Because they're all my song. How can that be? Because they're all played in my head. The digital age was made possible by the efforts of the enlightened who long ago realized that everything can be represented by a 1 and a 0. Who knows what will occur if the rest of humanity ever catches up to their further realization that 1 and 0 are the same thing. There was once a world in which the creatures had 2 tongues, one in their mouths, like us, and another directly connected to the mind. Wait a minute. Are you sure we're talking other worlds here? Back to architecture. Civilization, that is, humanity as a mental whole on the physical move, civilization got the idea for awnings from certain early on observations certain now forgotten men made inside their own skulls. Whew. Oh my, but I do so love a striped pattern. Oh, put me down for a solid any day. Okay, you Nellies, make up your minds. My crew ain't got all day. We got a job waiting at an office building with 2,000 windows. Plus, it's obvious. You obviously don't yet realize that it's all the same. Stripes, solid, checks, it doesn't matter. They're all the same. You know, it's not that often that you see a man in the building trades who displays such an understanding of the mind. At least not right out in the open. Update. People who believe that they're getting somewhere aren't. Oh, I'm sorry, the full heading of this item should have been advanced update. The simple conjured up the idea that the gods will place no burden on a man that he cannot bear, after they realized just how simple they were and to what degree the gods would take advantage of their condition. You see, people who believe that they're getting somewhere in the mental, transcendental sense are still making the mistake of thinking that there is somewhere to get to other than wherever you are at the present moment. Oh, God, moans a simple man. I wish you hadn't said that. In one planet's patent office, they closed down the files after reaching the letter M. Geez, you realize that means they never had television or knickers. Hey, knickers is spelled with a K. Or platform shoes or unicycles. It's spelled with a K, damn it. Q&A. One man asked another man a question to which he replied, I don't know. And after the first man revealed the answer, the other man said, well, right after I don't know, that was going to be my next guess. And after a moment, the first man chuckled at this retort and said, that's pretty clever. To which the other man replied, a little something I picked up from my mind. The way you spot a wealthy mystic is that he has but one possession. And even that one you can't see. Monogamy, my boy. Monogamy is the key, said the mystic to his son. A man who knows how to actually live alone doesn't care. He has nothing to lose and no one to be faithful to. What a rich, full, and satisfying life to some. One man spent his whole life attempting to peel away his perception of a subject from an object. A life, says he finds well spent. Monogamy, my boy. Monogamy is the key. One man told his mind, okay, look, I've come to this conclusion. You can go ahead and think anything you want to as long as you don't take it seriously. To which his mind responded, me take it seriously? Man, you hadn't even got a clue. The highway. One man decided on a particular driving tactic. Pay no attention to the car ahead and none to the one behind. The airway. One man's favorite song from the top 10 is whichever one's being played right now, although he tries not to listen. One man encouraged his children never to get their minds dirty. And one boy asked, you mean not to think about nasty things? No, replied the father. And a daughter said, you mean not to think about despicable acts? No, he replied again. And another son then asked, then you must mean not to think ill thoughts about other people. No, the elder replied, you don't get it. The only way to keep from getting your mind dirty is not to think about anything. Geez, the whole brood muttered en masse. Why don't you give us something really challenging to do? Them's my kids, grinned the father broadly as he continued to scoop them from his open skull. Some information you're unlikely to ever receive via routine sources. The universe, that is physical reality, as a whole, moves only once every approximately 23,000 years. What you're presently experiencing comes from your mind. There was once a man who hated watches, the sensation of being rushed, and the feeling that he was always running late, and finally discovered a solution. He threw away his mind. Pop quiz. Why so few mystics in Australia? Yep, the presence of boomerangs. Okay, Larry, you swim toward Tasmania, and Curly, you head for New Zealand. How to tell that you might be a mystic? You're constantly wet from head to foot, and you never go in. Myths. Myths are for children. Reality for grown-up children. And what's left for the enlightened, you ask? As well you may. As well you may. Day. Mayday, Mayday. Just a joke. On a planet much older than this one, there is a legend that says one man did once meet God in person and had but this comment on the occasion. You don't frighten me or impress me. You're too late. I've already accomplished that for myself. And just for an instant, the big guy almost got angry, but immediately had to recognize and appreciate his own handiwork. So he just smiled as he continued to scoop men from his brain. Sometimes, just for fun, this one guy would go all day long to life saying, "Give me a little kiss. Come on, give me a little kiss." Until life would finally kick him in the privates. Some people got a funny idea of fun, huh? One thing for sure, to live life at this intensity, you got to really know how to live life. Or maybe I got that backwards. Maybe it's you got to really not know. Oh, never mind. That's what a kick in that area can do to you. The two-eyed view is that sometimes it's empty and sometimes it's full. Just imagine what the three-eyed view is. One man heard a voice in his head saying, "Look into my eyes, look into my eyes." And he shook himself, declaring, "I ain't marrying no hypnotist. At least not again, I ain't." Which could have caused the source of the voice much laughter. Except for the fact of how it was, well, so tied into the man himself. A man wrote to a mystic and asked, "Say, just what isn't all tied up to man himself?" And the conscious one found this to be the most impressive letter he'd received since being notified that he was already a pre-selected winner. The Postal Service on some worlds will not deliver mail to the awakened, claiming that it is not cost efficient to move communiques the few nanometers involved between one synapse and another. The enlightened make great neighbors to themselves. Come on, baby. Look into my eyes. Just once. Being part of a mystical operation is at best a metaphor for being part of a mystical operation. Come on, baby. Look just once. What's the signal from the control room? Should I continue or stop? What's the director for? It's supposed to direct. Go over here? No. For those of you watching on your microwave, that was a little, I think it was a little inside television humor. I don't know how I would recognize it. One time recently, we were talking about poverty and how it is taken physically, ordinary people, and how it is considered all the way from strictly religious areas into somewhat conventional wisdom, as it's called, that if not poverty itself, at least an awareness of the egregiousness or the, not egregiousness, of greed. People agree to it. And so that there are, and have been, and continue to be attempts that people make that they believe that in some way will increase their understanding, will increase them as a person to do without possessions. I was attempting to point out to you that with everything else that is apparently proverbial conventional wisdom, especially anything that's ever picked up by the spiritually inclined, it had an original basis of which its current interpretation bears some resemblance, but I'll say scant resemblance, in that it always ends up as a theory rather than something for the person to do. And with the ordinary, if it ends up with anything other than a theory, any practice that goes on is an external practice. That is, of ordinary people believing, whether they do it or not, but even a few people do make such an attempt to physically give away their possessions in the belief that will give them more likelihood to increase their consciousness or win the favors of the gods, and etc. Whereas real poverty, the original meaning, the only meaning that would be of any interest to someone who might be interested in this, would be poverty of mind. But in the same way, as always, it tracks in a parallel manner if an ordinary person, if there was some validity to being physically poverty-stricken by your own doing, ordinary people will still try and be selective about it, just because of the way the mind works. If someone agreed, after reading about it or hearing about it, that it would be good if they gave away their possessions, that in some way either gods would favor them according to some holy scripture, or even their own feeling, if they pushed a little bit, that it is so obnoxious to them to consider giving away everything that they have acquired up to this point, that it must be good for them. It would be very hard, it'd be impossible, I would suggest, on an individual basis, to find someone who would do this totally. It might be a different situation if someone went to join a so-called mystical organization or religious order that could enforce poverty. That if, in other words, if they strip searched you when you came in and make sure you didn't bring anything with you, and that they can periodically did, as our fine prison systems do, had a shakedown, or at least kept you from ever having visitors, to make sure that you never acquired anything, you would have something closer to a possibility under those conditions. But if you had an individual person who was undertaking to live some more spiritual life or attempting to undertake his own enlightenment and pursuing it on the basis of what he had read and heard about, that he was doing it not in an organized milieu, and he decided to pursue the poverty idea, all you got to do is check with yourself. Such a man, and it's no attack on humans, this is just the way it is, but he would not give away everything. He might give away everything that his neighbors, he might give away everything that his friends could see. But there would be something or some things that he would be very unlikely, I suggest perhaps, that he would find impossible to give away. And it's easily explainable. The human mind can always do it, because if he gave away 98% of everything he owned and only kept 2%, give the man a break. Anyone attempting to appease the gods or to do something extraordinary such as that, and they pick out a goal, or they adopt a goal that they have read about, such as a man can only pursue a spiritual or more conscious life by having no possessions, and he adopts that. So to have no possessions is a 100% deal, and he gives away everything but 2%. Give the man a break. That would be his feeling. No one else even tries that. There would be nothing. I'm assuming you're following the point, that it's not an attack on people, but I'm telling you, and check with yourself for validation. If you decided, if you're an ordinary person and you got carried away in some apparent mystical fervor and decided, I will do this, and you gave away the deed to your house, you took all your clothes and you gave it to people on the street, and you cleaned out your bank account, God knows what, there would be something. You end up your stamp collection, your CD collection, or at least part of it, or a few books. There would be something. Think about it, wouldn't you? If you gave away damn near everything you had, up to the point of 98, 99%, you would not, after you had done that, and you kept stalling this one thing, listen, a box of some little prize you had, some little treasure, and it took you 2 or 3 days or several weeks to give away everything else you had, your car, your clothes, your stocks, your bond, whatever you had, and you kept saving this. You kept giving away everything else. And there it is, seeing your whole life, possessions go out the door, and there's only this one thing left. You get down to that point. After somebody had been through that, they would not hesitate to keep that. My God, they've given away everything else. It has memories, whatever it is. That is not, if there was any true use of poverty, does anybody understand by now? There's not, but if there was, not only poverty, but other things that the ordinary mind believes, religious people, that there would be absolute metaphysical, extraordinary, supernatural benefits would accrue to someone if they would but do so and so, such as give away all their possessions, or if they would but pray 24 hours a day, or 10 hours a day, or perhaps even if they would just go to Mass or to church or to the synagogue every day for some service, that if somebody picked out something that required that kind of continuing effort that was far beyond the norm, that there would be some extraordinary benefit occur to them. Even if that was true, there's no way to prove this, but you people realize that if you did not do it to the full extent, if you did it with any reservations, if it had any extraordinary potential to start with, you've lost it. And that is not in some sort of mystical realm. It's true in every realm. It's true down to the crudest physical realms, that if you attempt to do something, and if it does have the capacity, the potential to offer some extraordinary, that is, that it seems to almost have a larger payoff than what the cost was, which is what supernatural, that's what people imagine it would be. Even try to reverse some process. If somebody was an alcoholic and their liver was about to kill them, the poor stage of their liver after all these years, and the doctor says, you're going to die, and the man is convinced of it just from his own experience. He says, okay. And he continues, instead of, he'd been drinking a fifth a day. And so he stops for a day or so, or a couple of hours, and he thinks, well, a couple of shots. This is not a medical commentary, but you do know when you reach a critical point and you're now trying to reverse some process at a very crude, at a very physical level, you must do it completely. But in the same way, if prayer, if fasting, if meditating, if giving away your possessions, if it had the possibility of reversing some natural process or producing some result that seemed supernatural, that seemed to be of more value than the cost, even if it were true, if you hold back, if you keep a penny in your shoe, if you miss a day, if you start off and you have adopted the idea from somewhere that you must go and pray 20 hours a day, you must do it 7 days a week, and you must do it for the full 20 hours. You must take up some position, go to an altar or sit somewhere in a cell and do it. And you say, yes, I will, and you start doing it. And then you decide, my God, 20 hours, that's too much, I'll do it 19. If there was any potential, and you adopted the idea to start with, once you make conditions, once you shave points, it would not work even if it would have ever worked. Now to the reality of it. Whoever first said that, and whoever still understands it, anyone who's listening right now and understands it, the only poverty that would change a man, the poverty on which the idea, on which all religious ideas and conventional wisdom is based, is the poverty of mind. But it must be complete. Even ordinary people, non-mystics, attempt some form of poverty of mind. Anyone who's in analysis, anyone who talks to a friend or neighbor or family member for advice, people who sit around and, as it's called, reflect on the nature of their life and their problems, they are engaged in a partial, they're engaged in a low-level, non-understood engagement with poverty. Someone goes to a psychiatrist, someone seeks help. What are they asking for? They're asking for to be relieved of certain ideas. Not all ideas. If you could find a psychiatrist and you said, I keep thinking a few things that drive me crazy, whatever it is, it doesn't matter, but the way my mother mistreated me, the way I mistreated my mother, can you help me? And the psychiatrist says, how much money you got? And the man tells him, he says, not only can I help you with those thoughts, I can get rid of those, I can get rid of all thoughts. First say, what? Are you crazy? It's just these. A man doesn't go to a doctor and says, I'm convinced that my drinking is beginning to adversely affect my health. Is there something you can give me or some way you can help me stop this habit? And the physician say, well, if you've got enough money, not only can I do that, you're lucky you came here, I can stop all habits. Wait a minute. I didn't ask for all habits. All right. How about go to a minister, a rabbi, a priest, and say, my heart is sorely troubled by the life I'm leading. Can you relieve me of some of my sin, these particular sins? And the man of the cloth, the spiritual man, says, not only can I relieve you of those, I can relieve you of all sins. Wait a minute. Hey, don't jump off the deep end. I'll decide which sins I want to be relieved of. Realizing, I hope, that being treated of psychological ills, sins, habits, I'm speaking metaphorically in the case. But even if that had any useful validity in a man's life, do you hear what the scenes I made up are representing? You cannot halfway, you cannot conditionally undertake something. Non-mystics and people, they do not have to be seeking psychological, spiritual, or medical help. It can be people simply sitting around thinking to themselves, which is hard to talk about, but someone just sits around and talks to a friend, a family member, for advice, or just to air their problems about, well, this keeps bothering me, I keep thinking about it. I hadn't been the same since my wife left me. Since she ran off, and all I do is think about the way she mistreated me, and I just keep thinking about it. What will I do, Mom? And Mother says, well, you just got to get over it, blah, blah, blah. Whatever it is. Or he talks, talk to your brother. I mean, his wife ran off and left him too. Talk to your brother. Maybe he can help you. Do you realize what they're trying to do is engage in a selective form of mental poverty? That's what it all is. There is no such thing as a usable selective form of poverty, whether it be medically, psychologically, or any other way. So ordinary people are engaged in that. If you get past the ordinary stage, someone who has some suspicion of what this is about, someone who begins to understand what it's actually about, every night evidently I can come up with something, but for tonight I can say there is really not much of a better, a superior phrase than to say that the whole trick is mental poverty. But it can't be conditional. There is no such thing as conditional poverty of any kind. Was the point I was making by the hard physical examples. You understand, you can say that somebody may be poor, but they're not actually in poverty. Not complete poverty if they've got one thing. You have to be stripped of everything, or else it's conditional poverty. It's just you're poor, or you're poorer than other people. You cannot be conditionally, mentally in poverty. Every time that you look outside yourself to attempt to do this, you're holding on to something. Every time you argue with your mind, every time you try and correct your mind, every time you get mad at what your mind does, it is as though, let us say, that you are attempting to step outside into absolute bare naked poverty, and every time you do, you keep reaching behind you and you pick up something from the house. Still, you hold on to something you had. You got one coin that you kept. That is, every time that you deal with your own mind as though it had the ability to deal with you, as though it deserved to be dealt with. Last night, recently, I was combined just in my head thousands of years of mystical poetry of a certain sort and put together one that was roughly this. It's just a combination from all over the world over the last thousands of years that a man, the poetry would go like, a man says, I have but one robe. It's neither wool nor silk. It's neither warm nor cold. It's neither rough nor fine. Year after year, I wear it year after year, just one thing. And that could sound as though it is a pithy, in-your-face declaration of a spiritual man's poverty. And it can make ordinary minds go, my, that's my kind of guy. If the robe is so worn he can't tell whether it's wool or silk anymore, and he can't say whether it's warm or cold, it's probably just threadbare. That's all he has. And he wears it year in and year out. That is speaking of the mind. And speaking of the mind in regard to preferences. To say that I have but one robe, that is to be single-minded. That is for a man to understand that what we ordinarily call our mind is irrelevant if you're interested in this. If you're actually determined to see this through, that whatever is in your mind is irrelevant, totally irrelevant, not partially irrelevant, not conditionally irrelevant, not some parts of it pertinent and some impertinent, and maybe others sort of in a gray area. I have but one robe. To have but one robe, so you've got to give away the mind. You don't start out with one robe. Adam didn't find himself outside the garden of silence, outside the garden of no consciousness after life kicked him out. He didn't find himself with one robe. Once he was outside, the man had a truckload. The man had a full wardrobe. The man had robes for every day of the week, for all occasions. Everything he thought, he had a robe. You can say that from partaking of the tree of knowledge, what he really got from that was a full lifetime wardrobe. Him and all of his descendants, that is us. Thanks a lot, Adam. You're born dressed. You're born with as many robes as you need. That is, you're born with as many opinions and preferences mentally, as you will ever need. Have you ever, in your mind, been at a loss for a preference? Have you ever found yourself in the humiliating, if not dangerous, uncomfortable position of someone asking your opinion or preference, and you can't come up with anything? Nothing. My God. Nope. That is not the way life's arranged. There are many things that I know that people believe are harsh and inequitable about life. But you've got to admit this. You never run out of mental clothes. You never run out of something to think. But ordinary people would take that kind of poetry, even would-be mystics. I have but one robe, I do not know. It is neither. I have but one robe, it is neither wool nor silk, it is neither fine nor coarse, it's neither warm nor cold, it's neither long nor short. Year after year I have just this one robe. And they go, well, you can do it yourself, I already started, but you can analyze that sort of statement as well. It's so threadbare of just one of such a poor quality or questionable quality. He doesn't tell us, but he says it's neither warm nor cold. So what it means is when weather's cold and conditions are cold, it doesn't keep him warm. And when it's warm, it may not be cool enough to may be uncomfortable. He's just got this one thing, and conditions are constantly changing. And he's got this one. One robe will not do. The conditions, the weather, the temperature, the humidity is in a constant flux, except in areas of science fiction where they have now operational anti-flux machines. But as conditions continue to change, a man must have a change of wardrobe. Life has provided such, so that no one, unless they have made some obscure, extraordinary efforts, are down to one robe. It takes almost a lifetime of effort to have one robe. And you cannot have one robe and have one under the mattress or back in the closet. Well, I mean for an emergency. Hey, who knows? You either got one robe or you don't have one robe, which is an allegorical way of saying you have either discovered the nature of the mind, or else you are still in the vat and you have become part of the vat. You cannot separate you from the vat. You cannot separate you from the wardrobe. All you can do is pick at it. All you can do is find areas of your mental wardrobe that you find fashionably speaking, fashion in your fashion sense feels offended by some of your mental wardrobe. That's how, by the way, those of you of Western mythical inclinations. That is how God has kept man and woman, Adam and Eve, from going back to Adam and Eve and their progeny from going back to that unsavory state of nakedness. It keeps everybody clothed. Don't you think all the time? Yes, well, you're clothed. Those of you who don't remember the story, in its many versions, the biblical one is that they were naked before they partook of the forbidden act. And after that, they went, wow. And the Western English version, in some way, they interpret it as that they became embarrassed or they became shamed. I think it's the common interpretation or translation. A man who understands the nature of the mind, a man who discovers the nature of the mind, truly is ashamed. Just in private, no one but him is ashamed that it took him, whether it was 20 or 30 years, to realize what he had been doing. Ordinary man never is, but a man wired up for this, and attempting to do this certain thing, he is ashamed that it took him 30 years to realize that he kept walking around engaged in what appeared to be, as best he could, mystical attempts, but he was in the wrong wardrobe. He was not dressed for the occasion. The only way to be dressed for the occasion is to be undressed. Or if you like, to be in your one robe, which is the same thing. But as long as you've got a change of clothes, you've got a change of mind. As long as you've got a change of clothes, you've got other opinions. You've got preferences. And as long as you've got preferences, you will stay good children of Adam and Eve, because mentally you're constantly to yourself. And sometimes you use the external world's reflection. It's like, how do I look in this? What do you think? Except fashion, rather than fashion, what you're doing is your ideas. Well, I'm going to tell you what they're actually up to with the Federal Reserve. I'll tell you what they're trying to pull with that kind of political intrigue in such and such place. What you're doing is continually strutting your stuff. You are continually wearing the kinds of mental wardrobe that life has so kindly, at no charge whatsoever, provided you with at day of birth, which was the same as the time when your great-great ancestor Adam found himself outside. Does anyone find it interesting, just in a strictly rhetorical sense, because it's certainly not interesting to ordinary people, that through all of the so-called gains and new understanding of psychiatry, psychology, conventional wisdom, but let's take the professionals, because they went to school. People who's gone to school now for 12, 14 years of their adult life and are now psychiatrists, let's say. Or if you shave a few years and call them a psychologist, but psychiatrists. And they're dealing with people who complain about parts of their mental life. We'll forget the ones about behavior because it's still traceable to their mental life at the ordinary level. They complain about areas of their mental life. Do you find it curious that rather than these conditional treatments, that is, they will admit, the professionals at best, they might hope for some slight improvement over a lifetime in the complaints one has. And even that they will not take into account the aging process. But give them this, that they will admit that it seems at best partial success with people's complaints about their mental life. Do you find it curious that no one in the ordinary world ever says, well, wait a minute. The cure for all mental problems is don't think. Why has there not someone made their reputation in the world of psychiatry? Showing up at a convention or just sometime it go, my God, rather than all this, Peter dicking around in your pocket trying to, stop this feeling, keep talking about how your mother, and keep repeating it over and over, try to, write it down, wait a minute, quit thinking and the patient go, or at least the psychiatric community, hear this idea, and as a whole, be staggered with its profundity. And of course, slightly embarrassed that they didn't think of it. That, my God, it's the cure of all mental illness is not to be mental. Stop thinking, you idiot. They start saying to their patients. Don't even start with me. Once they saw the light, they show back up, and next week in their practice, their first patient comes in, a regular patient, been there for decades, and says, well, let me go back to telling you what I was thinking again this weekend about my mother. And the psychiatrist now, being full of it, full of the new knowledge, says, nay, save your breath. We have entered a whole new era. Don't tell me what you thought about your mother. Don't tell me what you've been thinking about how you're going to deal with the upcoming holidays when she might show. No! It has been revealed, thanks to your kind, up-to-date payments on your bill. I was able to go to Bern last weekend for that convention, and the truth finally came out. I have the cure. Listen to me, patient. Quit thinking. No. Don't tell me about your mother. Don't tell me about the holidays. Don't tell me about your childhood and what you think. Quit thinking. You know it won't happen. You can't even get the ordinary mind, which it can't do, to make any sense. Even in a kind of, I guess, perverse verbal way, an ordinary mind will go, yeah, you're right. The cure for having thoughts that plague you is don't think of any thoughts. Yeah, sure. But big deal. That's like saying, well, the cure for having certain foods give you indigestion is don't eat anything. But it'll kill you. That would be their attitude. Well, yeah, if you're going to say the cure for any particular disturbance that a particular thought or series of thoughts causes you is to say, well, don't think, period. Just be done with it. Sure, you can say that, but you can't do it. The part saying you can't do it, can't do it. The part that says that can't be done, I hear what you're saying, but it can't be done, that part's saying the truth. That's why this kind of information cannot be conveyed to someone. Because you can say, well, the whole cure, the very thing you're looking for, this whole idea of being conscious in another way, the whole idea of enlightenment, etc., is in your mind. It is nowhere else. It's the beginning of it, it's the hunger of it, and it's the fulfillment of it if it's ever going to come to pass. And if someone's listening with their mind, they can only say one thing, the same way that a patient would say to the psychiatrist, well, hey, I guess you're right, but it can't be done. And the thing saying it can't be done is what can do it. I'm tempted, I've done it before, to end and say, of course, it's a form of suicide, which has a certain dramatic ring to it. It's not really suicide to the mind. I'll give it one more shot again. It is as though you have activated a second mind. And even that, I keep using that, even that is misdirected because you've already got it activated every time you talk to yourself. Ordinary people, even at the slightest, which to them it is just slight and always very fleeting, anything resembling introspection. And people do it, ordinary people. When they catch themselves, maybe they say something to their boss or their friend or their lover, something slightly insulting. They start to make a joke. You misspeak. Maybe you say something about somebody's weight or their size of their nose or something, and then you realize, I shouldn't have said that. And for a moment, they are two people mentally. That is what guilt is based on. That's what embarrassment is based on. And we don't have time to go into this, but those of you who listen fast, that is part of the attraction to guilt. In case you think, people say, well, boy, I hate feeling guilty. No, they don't. People enjoy feeling guilty because it is a momentary awareness of two areas of the brain. In a meaningless manner, it's ordinary man's awakening. It is. Well, also what you're doing now as a form of it is humor, irony. It is having two things, two areas of the brain lit. Verbally, it might seem like what you're doing, I can put it another way, is your mind is entertaining two ideas simultaneously. It has to do that. That's what humor is, amongst other things, other descriptions. But that is, without your mind entertaining two pictures, two ideas simultaneously, nothing's funny. Nothing is ironic. There is no feeling of guilt. You can't feel guilty unless you're thinking of two things at once. I mean, put quite crudely, if there you are trying to pick up a woman, or there you are in bed with somebody not your wife, and you're a Catholic, or you're religious and your beliefs are that you should be sexually monogamous. For you to feel guilty about it, you have got to be aware that, well, I shouldn't be doing this, as far as your mind's concerned, one place. You've got to be aware of it while you're aware that you're doing it. You can't be just aware of one. If you're there in bed with somebody else's wife, or whatever you're doing, drinking or eating the wrong food, some forbidden, as long as your mind is only on that, you won't feel guilty. It's one reason people like to drink before they're going to do something they feel guilty about, because it cuts down, it helps localize consciousness in the brain. It's part of the fun. But to feel guilty, to laugh, to be sarcastic, you have got to have two areas of the brain just momentarily activated. So when I say that if you could, when the mind says, when it hears the idea that the cure for all disturbing thoughts, or I'm telling you people the way, one of the shortcuts or one of the descriptions of the fastest way to achieve another state is to tell the mind you should be only have one robe, or you should be nude. You should have no contrived ideas. You should not put on any preference. You should not lend yourself anymore to your mind saying, well, I like a warm robe, I like a cool robe, I like a silk robe, I like chocolate, I like pistachio. I'd like to go here. I'd like to see those people. If you could stop that, not selectively, but stop all that, and the mind says, okay, well, even if I hear that, what the hell does it mean? How can I stop? And you go, wait, you right now talking to me saying, how can I stop? You're it. You're what I'm looking for. And it goes, what? And not just that, unless you can hold a dual awareness there for a moment, then you become it, and you lose sight of the fact of it saying, how can I do it? And you think, well, you've got to be able to do it because you just asked me about it. You are the very place I'm looking for, and it goes, where? Why is it looking? There is no where but here, mentally. So, as I started to say, it's not really fair to call it suicidal. If you get to the point on your own to see it, you kind of wish it was suicidal, which would be one description of permanent enlightenment. Steady state enlightenment once you reach it. But it's not so much suicidal as it is that you can ignite two areas of the mind, and of course the original one, you got no problem. As I said, you were born with a full wardrobe, you were born with a full tank of gas. That thing will run until the undertaker shows. So that's not the problem. But if you can keep them both lit, it's not so much a matter of suicide of the original, but as you have shifted the attention, you have shifted the fuel, you become blind and deaf to the first one. It's as though it does not exist. It's as though you are now bereft of it, that you have given it away, that you now only have the one robe, you only have the one in which you are now by your own will, by your own effort, by your own understanding, by your own choice after you discover it. That I can be here, and I can through a certain, if you want me to quote one of the news stories tonight, if I can, was a certain man was born with an open wound, and for many years, with no success, attempted to heal it. And then he discovered a method requiring constant attention whereby the bleeding would stop. But then he found that he couldn't seem to give it the continual attention it needed, but just knowing that he could slowed the flow. The intent of that was what I'm talking about right now. It's not so much a matter that you absolutely do it, although if you can, right on, bravo to you. But to approach it on the basis of something that you can actually feel and experience at any time you want to, that is, that you can bring on this kind of state of dual awareness. And when you do, then what was going on in your mind stops momentarily. As long as you hold that awareness right now of just, I am conscious right here in my head, that I have stilled the waves in the vat. Or it's like this globe in here, and you empty it. You suck everything out, and it's like a void, like a vacuum in there, and it's all still, nothing going on. And as long as you hold your attention to it, as long as you use that certain method that man discovered, the bleeding stops, the activity stops. The mind is not dead, the original mind, but it stops. For what reason, I don't know. You either like it or you don't. You either think, yes, that's what I'm after. When you can hold them both, when you can hold awareness of that, even if you can't constantly, or you don't constantly do it, past a certain point, it has an effect of just knowing it. It's not a matter of just time, but that's what I've been, of course, saying to you guys about a certain kind of discovery, that there's something fairly simple that you can do, that you can keep that area of the brain, that is the original mind, the yakking mind, you can keep it on hold, in neutral, at bay, in the closet. Well, it's in a non-existent closet. And now you can stand naked with just one robe, poverty-stricken, full, rich, and satisfied. That's a hell of a way to end, though, what I consider to be a fairly inspirational and uplifting lecture tonight, by having to live on a sad fiscal note. That is, to point out that in this area, a man can only stay rich while he stays constantly, I'm talking about second to second, on his toes. You got to be able to hold the money, because every time you let go, you're done for. Oh, you mean you lose all your money and become poor? No, worse than that. Every time you let go, you become rich again. You're surrounded by that shit. It's clothes everywhere. Goddamn, it's brown clothes, white clothes, striped clothes, awnings with checkers on them. Hot clothes, cool clothes, hip clothes, square clothes. Clothes you wouldn't be caught dead in, clothes that the dead wouldn't be caught you in. Work on it. Wear it in bad health. For those of you in as big a hurry as I know that some of us are, we have had a brilliant new suggestion.